Hey guys, let me tell you about our sponsor real quick, which is Wix.com. It's the best place to build a professional website. And if you use the promo code POTP, you get 10% off any of their premium plans. So go to Wix.com. You know you need a website. You know it's going to help you out. Go over there. It's the easiest place to build one. Promo code POTP for 10% off any premium plan. I guess maybe we could talk about some key takeaways from today, because there was some interesting new information that came out. All of it just disastrous for the Democrats, and they can cling to all the stuff they want to, but man, it was bad. And it was also just bad to see that Mueller was so unimpressive. So unimpressive. You know, again, like you said before, maybe he's faking it. Maybe that's really him. Either way, that's not an impressive showing at a congressional hearing. So to me, what the biggest takeaway of the whole thing, which was actually something that Mueller was a little bit unclear about in the first testimony, but then he cleared it up in the second one. And he opened with it. He offered it himself. So I think, you know, he may have had some advice even from people around him who were like, yo, you got to clear this up because you made this sound bad. But what he said, that really should have been said a long time ago, because he was fine to just let people speculate about this. But that whole, the whole notion that has been literally the last thing that the Democrats and the mainstream media have been hanging on to. I mean, like, as if you're in one of those like action movies where there's that, like, you're in a helicopter and there's that like rope ladder that hangs down and you have to like hold a little girl in one hand and you're hanging on to that ladder with another hand as you fly through the skies of New York City. The last thing they're hanging on to desperately was that Donald Trump did commit obstruction of justice. Now, I know. We've been telling you he's a Russian puppet and he colluded with the Russians, and none of that's true. However, into the investigation that he was innocent of, he obstructed justice. And even though Mueller didn't say he obstructed justice, he did kind of say, well, here's 10 instances where he might have. And the only reason why he didn't conclude that Trump obstructed justice was because there's this this Justice Department legal opinion that says you can't charge a sitting president with a crime. So, he could be charged as soon as he leaves the White House. And this is where they get to the stuff where if he wasn't president, he'd be charged with obstruction of justice. Now, as I pointed out on the show before, number one, this is just really stupid, because the idea that if Trump wasn't president, he could be charged with obstruction of justice. It's like, well, if you weren't president and you fired the FBI director, what does that even mean? Only the president can fire the FBI director. So, if you weren't president, but you thought about firing the special counsel, like what? If I just fired a special counsel, I can't. Nobody except the president can do that. So even put it into the context of not being president was stupid. However, this was a death blow to that whole. This was cutting the ladder, and now you're falling with that little girl in your arms down into Times Square or the Hudson River below you. Mueller said no, that's actually not right. He said that we couldn't come to a conclusion on whether or not to charge him with obstruction of justice. And that's it. That's the end of it. So in other words, he wasn't being charged with obstruction of justice. Now, everybody should have known this already, because even by the Department of Justice guideline that says you can't charge a sitting president, which I find hard to believe that they would actually enforce it. By the way, that's not law. It's just something that the legal opinion office of the Justice Department kind of came up with. Because are you telling me that if Donald Trump, if they had uncovered evidence that he was a Russian puppet, we'd still go, well, got to beat him at the ballot box. Can't charge a president. You know what I mean? Like, that seems crazy to me. However, anyone should have known this, because even though the guideline says you can't charge a sitting president, that doesn't mean that Mueller couldn't write in his report, he obstructed justice, but we can't charge him because of this guideline. He could have written that. He could have said that. Also, another pretty big blow to the obstruction of justice nonsense is that if Donald Trump had been guilty of obstructing justice, it's not like Donald Trump himself would have physically obstructed justice, right? Like, even if Donald Trump, he would have had people around him do it, in which case you would have seen indictments of other people for obstruction of justice, right? So the fact that there were no other indictments of obstruction of justice, there were no indictments about a conspiracy with the Russians, that is in effect in exoneration on both counts. By the way, that word came up during the hearings. That was so creepy. When Mueller went out of his way to point out that he couldn't exonerate Donald Trump. And then one of the congressmen, to his credit, did jump on that and go, exonerate? Like, what the hell are you talking about? Prosecutors don't exonerate people. That is well outside the purview of a prosecutor. I don't even know who does exonerate people. Maybe priests? I don't know. Who can exonerate somebody? I suppose a defense attorney, if they come up with DNA evidence that conclusively proves that somebody else did the crime, I guess you could say you were exonerated in that sense. But prosecutors don't exonerate people. Judges, juries, none of them exonerate people. You find them not guilty. Can you imagine? It's just one word, but it's so creepy how it flips the entire idea of innocent until proven guilty on its head. Well, we can't exonerate you. So I guess, can you prove that you didn't do it? I mean, we don't have enough evidence to charge you, but we can't exonerate you. Like, okay. So that was pretty fucking creepy.
So based on what you saw today, because the last time he got up and he was talking and all the double negatives, you still had the media going, you see the head prosecutor thinks that either this person should be impeached, but he's just not allowed to actually do it. They were still speaking to him that clearly what he saw was, an undermining of his investigation, and Trump should have to be punished. There's because of the other branches of government and the corruption that they're not doing what Mueller clearly has outlined as being a problem. Is that just going to be dropped from here? Like, do they still have any of that to hold on to? Or
I think just in the same way that the Russia collusion thing was dropped, this is going to be dropped now, but they'll still try to fight for scraps.
Yeah.
And you saw that with the Democrats today. They've gone to this just pathetic thing. And look, I'm sure it'll be effective on some percentage of the population, but anyone paying attention, it's like, man, you are a dishonest piece of shit. Right. But they're doing the thing where they're like, and you investigated the president. Is that correct? Yes, that's correct. And you found that Papadopoulos lied. Yes, that's correct. And Cohen lied. And so-and-so lied. And so-and-so. And Roger Stone lied. And blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Okay. Next question. So they're just going, you investigated the president, and look at all these people who there's indictments against. So that they can fall back on, even though obviously, as anyone paying attention knows, it's like, yeah, but you were investigating the president for a conspiracy, and no one was indicted with anything to do with that conspiracy. And of course, this was, this has been known for quite a while. So what ended up happening with the Mueller, now Mueller, by the way, did not want to testify. He made that pretty clear in his news conference. And today, I think we all saw why Mueller did not want to testify. It was, it did not reflect well on him.
Well, and to speak to that, and I think that this is one of the things that we should definitely talk about, in terms of his initial job is to establish whether or not the president colluded with the Russians. And you would think you'd have to have a really good understanding of the initial evidence that opens up that kind of a thing to start establishing whether or not that's a legitimate, and nope.
Oh,
I mean, not only he won't even. I think he's going to get pulled back because he's got to answer for those questions.
Well, I hope he would get pulled back after the Barr investigation is done. But basically, what he was able to say,
which is such bullshit. I mean, this was the best bullshit I've ever seen anyone spew ever.
Well, because he said that because there's an ongoing investigation into the origins of the special counsel, or into the origins of the FBI investigation, which preceded the Robert Mueller special investigation. Because there's an ongoing investigation about that. I'm sorry, I know this is confusing, but because there's an investigation into the origins of the investigation that led to the special prosecutor, all right? That's what it is. Because of that, he can't talk about anything that has to do with the origins of the case. However, look, I mean, he was asked questions that he absolutely could answer. I mean, one person asked him at one point whether he had read the Steele dossier, and he said, I can't answer that because there's an ongoing investigation. And I said, I'm just asking you if you read the dossier.
He doesn't
I
want to
said,
be
I
under
can't
oath.
answer that. He can't admit that he read it, or
That he
even
didn't.
worse, maybe he didn't.
Yeah.
Because this was not what his gig was about. Because he was just a fucking cog in this deep state plot. And the truth is that we know who was working around him in this investigation were people who despised Donald Trump. Heavily biased agents who despised
People
Donald
left
Trump.
some really good jobs.
I'll tell you something else that I thought was really fucking interesting, not having to do with the origins of that at all. He was asked at one point whether he wrote his the statement that he said at that press conference.
And he wouldn't answer
And he
it.
wouldn't answer it.
Yeah.
He wouldn't answer that. So in other words, he didn't write it. So what the fuck was going on here? I mean, like, what? There was something that it's like, guys, what is going on here? This is very, very strange. You can't answer that? Why? Why wouldn't you answer that? Well, if you could answer that with a yes, I have to assume you would have answered yes. I also don't even see what's so bad about going, oh, me and my team put it together. But he just doesn't want to.
From the team.
Yeah.
It came from whoever coordinates between the media and the deep state.
Well, I mean, it's certainly. It's impossible to not speculate a little bit about that. He's telling you he can't answer whether he wrote this himself. And he was also asked again about how many people he actually interviewed. He wouldn't answer that. He wouldn't answer how much of the report that he actually wrote himself. So basically you're like, oh, so all of these people who are bragging, we will stop Donald Trump. It's really funny that we said this thing, like years ago, that this is a deep state move to try to, basically an attempted coup. And like since then, there's been like the text messages that have come out that it might as well have been like, this is a deep state coup. They're like, we will stop him. We have an insurance policy.
We're putting a coup together. You want in? We're cooing.
I was like, the people who are still denying it. I have this next text from Peter Strzok saying, this is a deep state coup. You guys trying to coup tonight? Anyone down to coup? Totally going to coup the shit out of this president. And they'd be like, well, I mean, he's just being hyperbolic. And, but, you can always find a defense, but come on. When the obvious answer is staring you in the face, like we know what this was. So there were a few really interesting moments in the hearing. Let's go. We got a couple clips pulled up. So let's go to the one that you pulled up first, Rob, which I think is an interesting one. Let's play this clip and we'll discuss a little bit.
Good morning, Director. If you'll let me quickly summarize your opening statement this morning. You said in Volume 1 on the issue of conspiracy, the special counsel determined that the investigation did not establish that members of the Trump campaign conspired or coordinated with the Russian government in its election interference activities. And then in Volume 2, for reasons that you explained, the special counsel did not make a determination on whether there was an obstruction of justice crime committed by the president. Is that fair?
Yeah. Yes, sir.
All right. Now, in explaining that special counsel did not make what you called a traditional prosecution or declination decision, the report on the bottom of page 2 of volume 2 reads as follows. The evidence we obtained about the president's actions and intent presents difficult issues that prevent us from conclusively determining that no criminal conduct occurred. Accordingly, while this report does not conclude that the president committed a crime, it also does not exonerate him. Now, I read that correctly?
Yes.
All right. Now, your report, and today you said at all times the special counsel team operated under, was guided by, and followed Justice Department policies and principles. So which DOJ policy or principle sets forth a legal standard that an investigated person is not exonerated if their innocence from criminal conduct is not conclusively determined?
Can you repeat the last part of that question?
Yeah. Which DOJ policy or principle set forth a legal standard that an investigated person is not exonerated if their innocence from criminal conduct is not conclusively determined? Where does that language come from, Director? Where is the DOJ policy that says that? Let me make it easier.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Can you give me an example other than Donald Trump where the Justice Department determined that an investigated person was not exonerated because their innocence was not?
I mean,
this is so busted.
By the way, he's 75.
Yeah.
He comes off like he's 95.
Yeah.
In this thing, like you almost like feel bad, like the way you talk to like my what would you say, grandfather-in-law? Is that the correct term? My wife's grandfather.
Yeah.
He's like 95. And he's more together than this guy is. Like he's got like, but you know, like when you talk to a 95-year-old, and so like if you said a sentence like that, you'd be like, Dick, don't fucking say this crazy complicated sentence. And then every now and then you'll be like, the baby's like rolling over now. The baby's rolling over. You know, you just have to. He's 95. Yeah. His hearing's not that good. You got to kind of, but it's like that with Mueller. Like this guy's coming. It's not that hard of a question to grasp. And it's like, dude, if you're struggling with this, you should not be this person. You should not have this job. And then, of course, which I actually tend to agree with you, where you said before, it's quite possible that this is an act. And he's just kind of playing up this like hopeless old. You remember in Seinfeld when Uncle Leo would shoplift and then he'd go, I'm old. So I don't know what's good. You know, it's like he's doing the Uncle Leo.
It's not. It's partially that. A lot of this is just the stall tactics are making him look a little bit dumb. When he's saying, hey, can you repeat the question? He's stalling. He knows that it's adversarial and he wants to be able to answer as little questions as possible. So
because imagine putting into an official report from an FBI investigation while we could not find enough evidence to charge whoever. We also couldn't exonerate him.
Which, by the way,
an outrageous thing to say.
And that is something that we've been saying for a while. You're a prosecutor. If you don't have the evidence, then that means the guy's off the hook. And then the media was trying to play it the other way. So finally, and I was saying, how is this not cleared up? That seems like it's a yes or no.
You're right. And good.
And finally, someone actually held him to it and said, what exactly is this standard that you're it sounds like you're inventing something here.
All right, let's keep playing from his response.
Not conclusively determined?
I cannot, but this is a unique situation.
Well, you can't. Time is short. I've got 5 minutes. Let's just leave it at you can't find it because I'll tell you why. It doesn't exist. The special counsel's job, nowhere does it say that you were to conclusively determine Donald Trump's innocence or that the special counsel report should determine whether or not to exonerate him. It's not in any of the documents. It's not in your appointment order. It's not in the special counsel regulations. It's not in the OLC opinions. It's not in the Justice Manual. And it's not in the principles of federal prosecution. Nowhere do those words appear together because respectfully, Director, it was not the special counsel's job to conclusively determine Donald Trump's innocence or to exonerate him because the bedrock principle of our justice system is a presumption of innocence. It exists for everyone. Everyone is entitled to it, including sitting presidents. And because there is a presumption of innocence, prosecutors never, ever need to conclusively determine it. Now, Director, the special counsel applied this inverted burden of proof that I can't find and you said doesn't exist anywhere in the department policies, and you used it to write a report. And the very first line of your report, says, and as you read this morning, it authorizes the special counsel to provide the Attorney General with a confidential report explaining the prosecution or declination decisions reached by the special counsel. That's the very first word of your report, right?
That's correct.
Here's the problem, Director. The special counsel didn't do that. On volume 1, you did. On volume 2, with respect to potential obstruction of justice, the special counsel made neither a prosecution decision or a declination decision. You made no decision. You told us this morning and in your report that you made no determination. So respectfully, Director, you didn't follow the special counsel regulations. It clearly says, write a confidential report about decisions reached. Nowhere in here does it say, write a report about decisions that weren't reached. You wrote 180 pages about decisions that weren't reached, about potential crimes that weren't charged or decided. And respectfully, by doing that, you managed to violate every principle and the most sacred of traditions about prosecutors not offering extra prosecutorial analysis about potential crimes that aren't charged. So Americans need to know this as they listen to the Democrats and socialists on the other side of the aisle, as they do dramatic readings from this report, that volume 2 of this report was not authorized under the law to be written. It was written to a legal standard that does not exist at the Justice Department. And it was written in violation of every DOJ principle about extra prosecutorial commentary. I agree with the chairman this morning when he said Donald Trump is not above the law. He's not. But he damn sure shouldn't be below the law, which is where volume 2 of this report puts him.
Yeah. Okay, so that was pretty great.
Fair.
Gotta say,
Yeah.
I mean, that
Held him to it.
it's hard to argue with any of that. And of course, by the way, also the whole hearing format just sucks because you get like a few minutes. Every congressman kind of grandstands. I mean, I enjoyed that grandstanding, but that's what it was. He wasn't really asking him questions. He's really kind of like going off on a rant. Just saying, wouldn't it be so much better? And I'm not like, there's a million people who'd be better at it than me. But wouldn't it be so much better if Mueller just had to do my podcast for an hour and a half? Like, wouldn't that genuinely be a better thing where you could not just make one little point, slap down a gavel, we move on to the next guy. He never even had to respond to any of that ranting, but actually be grilled in a sustained way for an hour. You know what I mean? Like it'd be better. And that's how bad government is. That my podcast would do a better job than these fucking hearings.